Thank you. Item 61.
Item 61 is a second reading. An ordinance of the City of Sioux Falls, South Dakota, the city, authorizing the issuance of its sales tax revenue bonds, authorizing the use of the proceeds thereof to pay the cost to design, construct, equip, and furnish an office building to be located at 231 North Dakota Avenue, and landscaping, street, and site improvements and signage with respect to the building and Van Epps Park for use by the city for various governmental purposes and the cost of issuance thereof, and pledging a portion of the sales and use tax proceeds of the city to the payment of said sales tax revenue bonds, fixing the terms of such sales tax revenue bonds, authorizing the execution and delivery of a second supplemental indenture to an amended and restated indenture of trust between the city and the First National Bank in Sioux Falls, and authorizing the sale, execution, and delivery of such sales tax revenue bonds in an amount not to exceed $21,900,000, plus costs of issuance, capitalized interest, if any, and debt service reserve funds.
Tracy, welcome.
Thank you, Mayor. Tracy Turback with the Finance Department. As the very lengthy title indicates, this ordinance would authorize the issuance of bonds to fund the construction of the proposed city administrative office building. The ordinance would authorize bonds to be sold in an amount that would raise $21.9 million for the project costs, the costs of issuing the bonds, the capitalized interest, if any, as well as funding a debt service reserve fund. The other, I think, very relevant term in the bond ordinance is setting the maximum term on the bond at 20 years, and the source of repayment would be the second penny sales tax revenues. That really covers the kind of the gist of the bond ordinance itself. I think most of what needs to be said about the project and the merits of the project has probably already been said. I know there are some folks here that will address a few more points, and I know you'll call for public comment here in just a moment, Mayor, but I don't want to rehash presentation material that we provided to you this afternoon. But there is one point I do want to take just a minute to address. I've commented on a number of occasions the benefits, the cost benefits of owning versus leasing, and although we've shared that information, a lot of details with the city council members, I don't believe we've ever shared that publicly. So I do want to touch on that just briefly to give people a relative idea of the magnitude of savings that I'm referring to. And what we did is we did an analysis of this particular building and what it would cost to do exactly as we're proposing to do, and that is to construct and own a building and finance it with the bond issue. And we compared that to an identical building that might be built by a private investor that the city would then lease, and compared the cost of leasing to the cost of owning an identical building. And as you might imagine, just as you would with a mortgage on a home, you are going to see the greatest amount of savings as a homeowner once that mortgage is paid off and you no longer have to make payments if you're comparing renting to owning your own home. And so the savings begin to accumulate after the bonds have been paid off, and by year 25, so that would be 5 years after the bonds have been retired, the savings would amount to a little over $2 million. But keep in mind that we no longer are making bond payments at that point, but under a rental scenario, the rent payments would continue to go on, and so as I said, the savings begin to accumulate quite rapidly. In 30 years, that's about $12 million in savings. 50 years, about over $94 million. And if you compare it to the length of time that we've been in the City Hall building, which is 80 years, and there's I suppose no reason to think that the city wouldn't continue to occupy this new building for that long, the savings of owning versus leasing would exceed $356 million. So it is truly astounding if you look at this as a long-term solution to a need that will not go away. It's going to be there for a very long time. And so I think that's a relevant information to share tonight. With that, I will conclude my comments and let the rest of the folks have their say. Thank you.
Tracy, thank you very much. Folks, this is a second reading, so you have the ability to engage the council as well. Is there anybody who wanted to engage the council? Welcome.
Tim Stanga. Again, second penny sales tax was supposed to be for the roads. I think maybe the city council, what they got to do is they got to look at what was voted on and what the requirements for that second penny sales tax was for, and see if we're overstepping our bounds on taking that second penny sales tax and paying for a lot of this. One thing I've realized is that when the mayor wants something shoved down everybody's throat, what we do is we bring in somebody to come in and try to sell something. There's people in this town that still think that the railroad tracks are not going to be running downtown. Where are the railroad tracks have been running? Because they've been told a lie or false truth. When the swimming pool was voted on, they were told false truths because of one reason. They never did come out and say that, well, the indoor facility is going to be about $2 to $3 million subsidy. Never told anybody that. What we do is we bend the truth to try to get things put down to people's throats of Sioux Falls. I just wish that one time we could be told the truth on whatever comes up. We can come up and we can sell that it's going to be cheaper to buy than to lease and blah, blah, blah. But the problem is we've been lied to so many times right now. Who in the heck do we believe and why would we want to believe them?
Folks, anybody else want to engage the council on this topic? Welcome.
Bruce Danielson. Like we talked about back when construction manager at risk on all these projects was brought about, we're saying the slippery slope is going to happen here, and if we approve the 50,000 here and the 25,000 here, pretty soon we're going to have real money and we're going to have 100,000 spent. So recently I heard an excuse made about building this building and going ahead with everything because, well, gee whiz, we've already spent 100,000 on it, so I guess we better go spend another 22 point whatever million, and because we've already spent this much. And then we hear the last time it's going to be over 25 million by the time we get all of the bonding paid for and everything. So I'm looking at a little piece that was laying on the table over here, and then just listening to Tracy a few minutes ago and talking about the prudent use of tax dollars, and it moves. What I'm seeing is it's the only thing that we're doing in removing any of our current leases is the one for the city attorney's office, and I understand that's about $130,000 a year. And so we're going to go out and we're going to make multi-million-dollar bond payments so that we can move that $130,000 in rent over to the second penny. And so what have we done? We've just moved it out of our current liabilities into our long-term liabilities. So when it says owning costs less than leasing, you know, that's a pure fabrication, as we usually find from these meetings. So one of my questions I had, as Tracy was even just talking right now, is he saying we're moving people out of the current city buildings and into a lease building? Is that what he's trying to say? So we're going to get rid of the railroad building, we're going to get rid of this building, we're going to get rid, what buildings are we going to get rid of that we can turn into cash so we can pay for an administration building? None of this is making any sense. We just keep hearing all these platitudes and wonderful things we can do with borrowed money, but we're not seeing how we get it paid for. And based on all of this, you know, I know my property taxes went up $250 this year just because we keep building these Taj Mahals. Thank you.
Thank you. Folks, anybody else want to engage the council? Welcome.
Good evening. My name is Dennis Bresky. I'm Senior Vice President with NAI Sioux Falls, a commercial real estate company here in town, and I've been involved in commercial real estate for about 25 years. I'm here tonight because I received a call from one of the city councilors and had a subsequent conversation regarding the administration building and some alternatives that involve properties that I manage. One of the properties that I was called about, which is the First Dakota National Bank building. I realize I'm coming in very late here. You're about to approve the financing or this or to take a vote on it, and what I'm going to talk about is kind of back a few steps, but I really wasn't consulted about this topic until a few days ago, and I just felt compelled to kind of highlight a couple of things regarding this process. And so that's why I'm here. I was called about the First Dakota National Bank building, which is right next to Sioux Falls, which has been investigated a couple times. It's a difficult building to use for expansion of City Hall because the bank would need an awful lot of money to buy land and build a new building. But in the conversation about that property, I have always felt very strongly that the city should consider another building that is, I think, ideally suited for expansion of city government. And that building can be delivered for, it can be purchased for at most $6 million and can be remodeled for about $4 million and will give you 76,000 square feet of space. And it is located directly across the street, almost directly, maybe a little bit to the north of where you're planning to build this proposed building. And it's the 300 building. And I just felt compelled that if there's an opportunity to save $12 million, that it should be very seriously considered. And in the council members that I've talked to, they were not aware of this option. The building's not on the market. And so it's not readily apparent. And it's also a building that some people might look at and say, it's too tired, it's too old, it's not where we want to be. It's a great structure. It has 76,000 square feet. It is surrounded by land that the city already owns. The building rents a lot of parking spaces from the city of Sioux Falls. And so I just felt compelled that that idea should be fully considered by the city and the city council and the citizens before deciding to spend $22 million. As a commercial real estate agent, whenever I work with a buyer, I always can have them consider existing buildings prior to building new so that they can compare what the cost is going to be if they buy an existing building and compare that to buying land and building a new building. And sometimes if you get lucky and you find the right property, you can realize a substantially better value. So I'm sorry, Mayor, you're a good friend of mine. I love your enthusiasm for the city and how hard you work, and I know this is an important project to you, but I just really felt it's very important that this idea is considered. It's just a very good fit. I've been doing this a long time. It's a very good fit. So that's I guess, my whole point.
Thank you.
You bet.
Appreciate it. Folks, anybody else want to engage the council on this topic? Welcome.
As Dennis kind of mentioned, I got something similar to say to that about options. Probably 2 years ago or a year and a half ago, we got repaid on our levy bonds from the federal government. I believe we got $18 million. The money is supposed to go back to paying off the levy bonds. What we did with the money was instead of putting it in an account or using it for infrastructure, we went and we bought our indoor pool with it. So what I can't figure out is why all of a sudden we said we've been talking about this building since 2007, but for some reason when we were talking about spending the levy bond money, it never came up in conversation that maybe since we can't pay those bonds off till 2018, why don't we take that money and build the new administration building instead of an indoor pool? So I don't understand why that was never brought up in conversations. So what we did was we took money that's supposed to be used to pay off a bond to build an entertainment facility with cash, and now we want to turn around and borrow money to build something that apparently is needed for the city. Doesn't make any sense at all. I say vote no on this and re-study the whole thing. I did come across something tonight before I came here, and I forgot to bring it with me, and I found this even more interesting when we're talking about sales tax bonds and bonds in general and borrowing for the city. Apparently, the superintendent of Harrisburg Schools, Mr. Holbeck, has been getting a lot of complaints because the people who live in the city of Sioux Falls and Lincoln County in the Harrisburg school districts, their taxes went through the roof this year, and they wanted to try to blame the school. Well, Mr. Holbeck put out an email this past Saturday that said, whoa, this Harrisburg school district has nothing to do with this. This has to do with assessments from the city. So when we start talking about how we have all this power to borrow more money, sure, if we want to keep raising everybody's taxes, we can borrow as much as we want. But I don't think everyone is real keen on getting their property taxes raised like they have been over the last couple of years. So that's another thing to consider.
Thank you. Welcome.
For the record, George Hahn. I'm a real estate agent here in Sioux Falls, as is Mr. Bresky, and I'm a lifelong resident of this community. I agree with everything that Tracy has said with respect to the opportunities to own a building without paying all the commercial costs that a for-profit enterprise would have. The savings over the terms he has described are very real. I've used numbers like that in economic analyses I have done myself. What Dennis brings up is something that has been talked about from time to time, but never really has surfaced. We've repurposed a lot of buildings in downtown Sioux Falls. You can go back and name it just as well as I can, and they've all worked out. The most recent repurposed building is the former Western Surety building, which was only 30 years old, and now it's 35 years old and back in better condition than when it was new. I'm not satisfied with the economic feasibility approach which the city took to analyzing the need for the space or the cost opportunities for the space. When you go out and say, I'm going to build an office building, whether it's private or public, first thing you do is analyze every building in the market that has similar space, that has rents in probably the $18 triple net range, and you say, what is my absorption rate? How fast will this lease up? What will the triple net rents be? Will I be able to save money owning versus renting? I think Tracy has answered that without question. I've seen dozens and dozens and dozens of economic feasibility studies on all kinds of projects, including office buildings. I've helped perform some of those, not only here in town for MAI appraisers, but out of town. We have to step back, in my opinion, and reassess the immediate needs, the immediate availability of other structures that could cost considerably less, not only in the short term, but over the long run. And another thing that for 47 years, I've heard the city fathers say, oh, we're going to start acting more like a business. Well, we still haven't done that with respect to setting aside fixed asset replacement reserves. Reserves to replace roofing, tarmac, air conditioning, heating, electrical, things which will go bad in anywhere from 20 to 80 years. We haven't done that. Private enterprise can't get a loan unless they do that. The city hasn't done it because, oh, we can just go out and tax people. These things need to be considered. Have we also looked at the option of telecommuting? Do we need simple clerical help all in one place aggregated in a cluster? Not necessarily. Every major financial services industry hospital in this town has telecommuting with people at home as far as 80 to 100 miles away. That is something we also need to consider when we look at the overall big picture. Thank you for your time, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, George. Folks, anybody else want to engage the council on this topic? Welcome.
Hello, Jerry Fromm, president of Henry Carlson Company. Earlier today, during the informational, we talked cost per square foot of the building. And just to clarify, the current design and cost of construction equates to about $233 per square foot for a new facility, 79,000 square feet. That includes underground parking, roughly 20,000 square feet, first floor, second floor, third floor shell. The total project cost we've been talking about is $21.9 million. So that equates to $277 per square foot. During the informational, there was some discussion about purchasing 40,000 square feet of office space for in the $75 square foot range. And I can tell you that at that price, you're going to be purchasing a building that's going to need significant upgrades and renovations to be considered equal to the facility that we're proposing here at the city admin building. I don't disagree with some of the comments that Dennis made earlier about purchasing a building, but the thing that is very unknown in that is that $4 million budget to renovate that existing 300 building a realistic number. We're talking about, we don't know, the timeline is uncertain as well. When will that building be available? And we know that the cost of construction only increases as time progresses. So the point I'd like to make here tonight is that if we're comparing a new building that's designed for the purpose of city government, you're going to get exactly what you want day one. We've got plenty of room to grow. We're building this building. There's cost associated with the existing footprint that would allow the building to be expanded another floor, taking that total square footage from 79,000 square feet to just under 100,000 square feet. Point being that it's a new space. It's not a space that you're trying to renovate into what you want for a cost that would be determined after the building is available, after the building is purchased, after the building is designed. These costs are in front of you here today. A yes vote today means with certainty we can provide you for $21.9 million a 79,000 square foot office building that can be used for city government immediately.
Jerry, thank you. Folks, anybody else want to engage the council? Welcome.
Jeff Hazard, Coke Hazard Architects. Just wanted to address, again, a comment that was brought up at the informational meeting related to the potential for city-county collaboration. I think probably almost everyone agrees that that's a desirable goal. And I would say that just from a practical point of view, if county needs were identified within the next 6 months, we could easily incorporate them into the design without a hiccup in the process. And if those needs are identified after that point, I just want to reiterate my comments earlier that the building is designed to be very, very flexible. It's a very straightforward building. It's entirely reconfigurable at minimal cost, and whatever needs the county might decide they need to have addressed in this facility could easily be addressed at any time during the life of the building. And I guess I would second Jerry's comments about looking at existing real estate, because you're really looking in general at an apples and oranges type of comparison. Not only is there a question about what the cost might be in acquiring and renovating an existing building, but I think there's also a question about the programmatic fit of whatever existing building it might be. For example, the 300 building would put the city's employees on, I think it's a 6-story building, on 6 levels compared to 3 levels in this building. And the 300 building probably would be very difficult to expand. So you would meet needs for the midterm, but not for the long term. There's been some discussion about meeting 50-year needs with this new building. I mean, I would certainly say that this building is at least, that we're designing is at least a 100-year building and probably more. The City Hall building has been in use now for 80. I don't think there's any doubt that it has another 20 years of life in it. This building will be designed at least that level of quality, and not only will it be usable for that period of time, but it will be able to be expanded, which City Hall cannot be, to accommodate needs that we're not yet aware of. Thank you.
Thank you. Folks, sir, did you have a comment? Welcome.
For the record, Briggs 1. I think we should put this on hold tonight for the time being and look at the other options. Briggs 1 again. I think we should put this on hold for the time being and look at the other options as the gentlemen before me have brought up to you. We should go back and compare the costs between these alternatives that have been brought up and see what the benefits are versus this building that we're going to be doing. Now let me put a different perspective on the vote that you're about to cast tonight. Tracy spoke of the cost savings over 80 years. Well, in 80 years, I'll be 98 years old. The decision that you make here tonight is going to have long-lasting effects on our city long after we're all gone. So I hope you put it on hold and go back and look even more at this decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Folks, anybody else want to engage the council on this topic? Very good. Thank you. Council?
Move for approval.
Second, Anderson.
Councilor Kiley has made a motion to approve this item, seconded by Councilor Anderson Jr. Councilor Kiley, any thoughts?
A motion to amend. I'd like to make a motion to amend the ordinance as presented by adding a paragraph D to Section 4 that reads as follows. The Series 2016A bonds shall not be sold any earlier than October 1, 2016.
And I'll second that.
Councilor Kiley has made a motion to amend the item, seconded by Councilor Vice Chair Rolfing. Councilor Kiley, could you read that again, please?
Yes. The motion to amend the ordinance as presented by adding a paragraph D to Section 4 that reads as follows. The Series 2016A bonds shall not be sold any earlier than October 1, 2016.
Councilor Kiley, thank you. And Councilor Rolfing, thank you. Comments? I'll go to the, then I'll come right to you, Councilor Rolfing.
We have, and I would agree with many that we have discussed this very thoroughly, not only this afternoon, but over the last 12 months. And the purpose of the motion that I just made is to allow, we have heard that there could be potential for collaboration with the county. And by October 1, the county will know their budget as well as we, the city, know our budget too. So it's conceivable, and it's been communicated to us by members of the county that they would have a better idea of the direction that they would like to go concerning this project, whether they would like to move forward with us in any way, shape, or form. And this motion simply allows the time for that to happen.
Councilor Vice Chair Rolfing.
Yes. Tracy, could I ask you a question, please? As you're walking up, this amendment will allow things to go forward except for the sale of the bonds, which cannot take place before October 1st, 2016. So that will, I'm trying to put these words correctly, that'll not necessarily stop everything, but it will allow the council, if they wanted to go back in October or in September and say, no, we're not going to go forward with this project. We're going to stop it at this point. Correct?
You're partly correct. The work on the project that if the work on the project itself would stop and not restart again until October. So we would not further engage the architect or the construction manager to move forward any further with the design of this building until after that time had elapsed. So we would not be incurring any additional costs for the project. And that's with the intent of allowing additional time to have those discussions that have been discussed with regard to the county collaboration.
Right, and if the council did nothing between now and that time, the project would go forward. If they decided to do something, the project could be stopped if for some weird thing happened.
If the council does nothing more, takes no other action beyond that, then the project would be in a position to move forward in October to restart the design and finish the design process without any further risk of increasing costs or delay. If the council does, in that 6-month interim time frame, if another element or another opportunity or another concept does emerge, that would allow the council then the opportunity to put on the brakes and say, no, we're gonna go another direction.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Buck.
Question for Attorney Fifley. Compare this motion to if we were to change the motion to defer second reading to October 4th. What would be is there a difference in activity on the part of the city if we were to just physically say no, nothing? Is there any difference between this motion and deferral? Sorry.
Well, substantively, this council is making the decision to make the apparatus in place, but a future council, because 4 of you are going to be replaced, would have the ability to come back and repeal or amend this ordinance at a later date up to October 1st. Whereas a deferral till this time, you're taking the decision out of this council's hands as it sits right now. And I think I don't want to speak to the movement's intent, but my understanding is that the belief is that this council has been educated on it and understands it the best to make this decision. However, if something new comes along as a county partnership becomes available or something else, that future council would still have the ability to amend or repeal this ordinance.
Thank you.
Councilor Kelly, before I go to you, Councilor Erickson.
Well, and I just want to say one of the other differences would be that we would revote again. We would simply delay it to October 4th and revote on it. A vote that's on the table right now is really approving it, and once October 1st happens, then here we go, off we go. And I know there's been a lot of moving parts. I know we've had a lot of conversations over the last couple months and year and 10 years. And I appreciate all the input that's come forward tonight. There was a new concept that I had no clue about. There's how many other, no offense, but this is one concept. There might be 2 or 3 others that aren't on the market. We heard not too long ago about a lot of the sales oftentimes happen not on the market. That's just kind of how it shakes down at times. So that's my concern with that. I do want to just make a couple of comments about some of the testimony as well, is that some of the numbers, we're splitting hairs here. We're not comparing apples to apples. We're comparing leasing buildings for 80 years for a new 79,000 square foot building. That's not what we need right now. So of course we wouldn't over lease. So those numbers don't necessarily go side by side. The $277 square foot or the $238, I believe it was, didn't include the land. So again, we're splitting hairs with the numbers here. And so it comes down to, I know it's been an issue of, should it be this council? Should it be the next council? I have full faith in whoever's sitting in these chairs, because they are elected by the people. We have a due diligence, regardless if it's us voting tonight, and we'll decide that shortly, or if it's the new counselors that come in. I know they're very educated, very smart, and able to catch up pretty fast. There's always votes that take place moving forward, and I just really caution on allowing that ball to go ahead and roll away, because until something new, who defines that? How does that happen? If we set that October 4th date, we can then approve it at that time if the county hasn't come back and wanted to collaborate, which was the intent of delaying it a little bit further to have them on board. So I just really caution approving the motion on the table right now, and I would support an October 4th deferral for the second reading.
Councilor Kelly.
I'd like to go back, and I would like to comment, but first I do believe, and Tracy, if you want to come forward again, I do believe that, Tracy, I'd like to say that I had a crystal ball and could foresee that we're going to have another alternative presented to us by Mr. Bresky this evening. I did not, and I do agree that it would be wonderful to have a lot of other information that certainly isn't available to us here tonight. But would this proposal to delay the release of the bonds till October also, even though the intention was to allow time for the county to come on board with it, would it also allow us to evaluate other alternatives?
Certainly. Yeah, I believe it would.
And I think this is still the perfect opportunity to do just that, to bring on the county. We have the opportunity to review this other alternative at the same time, and yet we can make the decision to move forward and ensure that we're not going to lose even more time, because more time delayed is just going to escalate the cost of the price of this project. And again, as Attorney Fifley had mentioned, this council has been working on this project for 12 months. I have no doubt that the individuals that are going to be coming forward in the next month are going to be intelligent, very prudent individuals. But this council has 12 months of experience on this project, and I really do believe it is our responsibility to move this project forward at this point in time.
Mayor, may I make one comment? I know, based on some of the public testimony we've heard tonight, somebody that maybe hasn't been following this project might come to the conclusion that the city, the project team has not looked at other alternatives, and that's nothing could be further from the truth. We have spent well over 2 years evaluating other existing buildings, leasing opportunities. Every opportunity that we could identify has been looked at and evaluated. I know Sue Beckett and her team have led that effort, and Sue provided me with a list that covers both sides of this page of options and alternatives that were looked at and evaluated. And I believe the 300 building is on that. Now, it wasn't looked at as a purchase. It was looked at as a potential tenancy arrangement. But I think Councilor Kiley is spot on. If there are other opportunities out there that may be on this list that could be revisited, or others that maybe didn't make the list, we certainly think we did a thorough job, but another 6 months would certainly open the door to evaluate other possibilities. Thank you.
Councilor Jameson.
Tracy, just didn't want you to go sit down and then call you up. Thank you, Mayor. So just in my brief history here, the only time that I can remember ever delaying the sale of bonds has been in a project where we bid it out. Somebody said, yeah, it's going to take you $10 million to build it. And while we're doing the bidding process, and we're going to hold off on selling the bonds because we think there's a favorable market coming, and we want to wait. And the city still has a lot of engineering or drawings or architectural work to do to actually get ready to actually order materials or something. Has there been any other case that you know of like this where we have approved a project but then held it off for 7 months before we actually sell the bonds? It just seems like an odd approach. I just want to know if it's the first or if it's just something I haven't heard of.
I'm not aware of any. Normally you would sell the bonds as close to the time that you would actually need to begin spending the money. And so it seems very appropriate that if we're not going to spend any money on this project until fall, to not sell the bonds until then.
Okay, thank you. And as I think it's true, it is the only one that I've ever heard of where we've approved it at a council meeting like this and set another date for the sale to occur. It just doesn't fall in line with the process. But more in direct with this actual amendment, again, what I'm sensing is a willingness to cooperate with the county, collaborate with the county. But what's odd is that prior to this, it's almost been told to us that they've already done that. We've already passed that. And now it's time for us to, provide strong leadership, get the job done, pass the finish line, whatever it was. But now it appears as though we're, okay, yeah, we want the county to come on board, but you can't expect the county to participate in a full fashion, like we'd all hope, and collaborate if you've already got your building design. You can have third, fourth floor. We've got first and second picked out, laid out like we want. And if you consider it all what the county has on their first floor, there's no way this works. And as long as we're talking about other projects, consider the county courthouse building as it is today. Beautiful new building, right? And you've got that old administrative building next to it for the county. Imagine the county building, courthouse, extending out further to the south. A new admin building for the county and a new admin building for the city, all together at one location. And the county's got, I just want to urge that we consider putting the county in the driver's seat with us. That's all.
Councilor, thank you. Councilor Karski.
Councilor Kiley and maybe anybody else that wants to answer this or help me out here. We're talking about delaying this sale of the bonds pending some epiphany from somewhere that we can do something different. Who's going to be doing the homework? Who's going to be looking for this? Who's going to be in charge of this process? Do we have a thought on who's going to be driving this program?
Councilor Karski, there's a question for...
Asking if anybody had put any thought into that. We're delaying this for 6 months, hoping that we're going to have some enlightenment, but I don't hear of anybody in charge of any program that's going to be going forward to look on this. Based on that, I'm going to urge your denial of this program.
Councilor Karski, in the spirit of probably Sue, I don't know if you'd want to give it an attempt, at least from an administrative standpoint, and then I think he kind of directed it towards you also, Councilor Kiley. I don't want to speak on your behalf, Councilor Karski, but Sue, any thoughts on Councilor Karski's question?
Definitely. As we said, we approached the county a year ago. I attended their facility building committee meeting 1st of May of last year. Told them about the idea and that we had come before you folks the month before to talk about our suggested proposal for a new administrative building on that surface parking lot that we already own land on. And it would be a great location for them as well. I did spend time later that month with Cindy Heiberger in particular, giving her a tour of City Hall, showing her our renovated spaces, and how it talked about the open office type of concept and how we were planning to do that in the new building as well, and that there would be plenty of room for them should they care to be part of our building. They carefully considered it and were very professional with us and very friendly, and said at the time that they had other more pressing facility priorities. And hence they backed away at that point. We have again approached them. I attended a January regional planning meeting where the counties were represented, as well as some of the city councilors, talking again about facilities, and they emphasized the jail needs and the study that they're doing there. Since then, we have met several times with a couple of the other county commissioners, again, just expressing a desire to work with them, talking about collaboration opportunities, and our building, and the fact that it's flexible and expandable. So I would continue to lead that charge. I would be happy to do so. Like I said, we have reached out to the county several times, and we would continue to do that.
And Councilor Karski, did you want to address?
Yeah, just follow up on that.
Please, Councilor Karski.
Other than collaboration with the county, what about other building options, purchasing, these types of things that haven't been, or maybe they were looked at as leases but not as purchase? When or who decides that this Plan B is better than Plan A on the table? What is the metric we're going to be using to determine that? How does that come before the council?
Well, from 2012 through last year, when we came to you with this plan, which was to build a new building, we vetted through more than 24 options, including buildings that were for sale, including buildings that weren't on the market, that we approached them to see if they would be for sale. One by one, we went through and did our due diligence. We were heavily concentrated on downtown properties because that's what makes sense for us in terms of close proximity to City Hall, which is what we need for our staff, and to serve the public better too. So we did use a realtor to help us with that endeavor. We would continue to do that and vet through any other options that might be available. But in each of the cases of the downtown properties, parking was a major consideration. Proximity to City Hall was a major consideration, and the size of the building and whether or not it was expandable. And one by one, each of the properties that we vetted through just did not meet our needs.
Councilor Kiley, would you want to address Councilor Karski's question as well?
Sure. Well, in terms of epiphanies, I'm not certain that I've had one recently. And I'm not certain that I'm going to have one anytime in the near future. And as tired as I am right now, I'm wondering if I did have one, if I'd even recognize it. But who should be working on this? And I'd have to say that really, based on information that is coming to me, and most of this is through secondhand, that the county is involved in, I'm going to call it projects because I do not want to speak for the county. But they're involved in certain projects that might shed some new light on their situation. And if everything fell into place, there would be the possibility that they would collaborate or be willing to look at a collaboration with us in this particular project. So I guess a lot would depend upon that, and I wish I could give you a better answer, but that's the best that I could do at this point in time. And I will state that previously we did as Sue has mentioned before, we have received a letter from the county stating that they were not interested at that time to be involved in this particular project until this recent development.
And there's not a perfect answer, I don't think, to Councilor Karski's question. So thank you, sir, for asking it. Appreciate it. Council, we're talking about the amendment as it has been proposed. And if there is no further discussion, we'll vote on the amendment, which is to, we'll read it one more time, if you don't mind.
The amendment was made by Councilmember Kiley, seconded by Councilmember Rolfing. The Series 2016 A bonds shall not be sold any earlier than October 1st, 2016.
Roll call vote, please.
Councilmembers Erickson.
No.
Erpenbach.
Yes.
Jamison.
No.
Karski.
No.
Kiley.
Yes.
Rolfing.
Yes.
Staggers.
Yes.
Anderson.
Yes.
That has passed 5-3. We now have an amended main motion. Is there any further discussion? A roll call vote, please.
Councilmembers Erickson.
No.
Erpenbach.
Yes.
Jamison.
No.
Karski.
No.
Kiley.
Yes.
Rolfing.
Yes.
Staggers.
No.
Anderson.
Yes.
The mayor votes yes. That is passed 5-4. Please, no. Thank you. That is passed 5-4. Item 60.